Sayyid Ali Khamenei was born on April 19, 1939, in Mashhad, as the second son of Sayyid Javad Husseini, a man who was indifferent to worldly possessions and led an austere, modest life. His grandfather, Sayyid Hussein Khamenei, was among the scholars who had supported the constitutional revolution. His mother was a devout and learned woman with a genuine passion for literature and a natural gift for poetry. Khamenei began his education at the age of 4, learning the Holy Quran, and simultaneously pursued Hausa, seminary studies in religious sciences, a tradition predominantly followed within the global Shia community for training Islamic clerics. In 1957, at just 18 years of age, he accompanied his family on a brief journey to Najaf, a city of profound religious significance for Shia Muslims located in Iraq. There, the young Khamenei studied under eminent scholars, including Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khoui. From 1957 to 1964, he resided in Qom, one of the most revered religious cities in Iran and the principal center for clerical training, where he benefited from the guidance of distinguished teachers such as Boroujerdi, Shahid Khamenei, and Allama Tabatabai. The greater part of this period was devoted to intensive research, scholarship, and teaching. In 1964, despite a deep yearning to continue his studies, he was compelled to return to Mashhad to tend to his ailing father. He found himself at a profound crossroads, caring for his father, which carried its own spiritual merit, or pursuing his academic ambitions and loftier goals. He chose to serve his father. Khamenei also possessed a deep affinity for poetry and literature. He had long been drawn to reading novels and stories, and throughout his life consumed a wide range of celebrated works from world literature. During his time in Mashhad, he participated in literary gatherings alongside some of the prominent poets of that era and composed his own verses. His engagement with research, writing, and translation began during his youth while he was still immersed in seminary studies, and he left behind a considerable body of work from that period. Khamenei's first encounter with Ayatollah Khomeini occurred in 1957, when he was still 18. In 1961, when the influential and charismatic cleric Ayatollah Khomeini launched his struggle against the Pahlavi regime, the young Khamenei was among the very first to rally behind his movement. As his political engagement intensified, he was arrested for the first time in 1963 by the Pahlavi regime and imprisoned in Mashhad, though he was released shortly afterward. His second arrest came a few months later, when he traveled to Zahedan for religious preaching and received an enthusiastic reception from the local population. The Pahlavi regime detained him in Khazali prison, a facility reserved for political prisoners, though he was once again released before long. From that point until the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, he remained under continuous surveillance by state security agents. In the autumn of 1964, Khamenei and a circle of like-minded associates, including figures such as Ali Asghar Sanjabi, formed a group of 11 individuals united by the shared objective of resisting the Pahlavi regime. In 1967, the group was uncovered by SAVAK, the regime's secret police and intelligence apparatus. Several members were arrested, and Khamenei himself was pursued. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison on charges of membership in this group, but refused to appear before the court. In total, he endured multiple imprisonments under the Pahlavi government. The most grueling period of his captivity came in 1974, 4 years before the revolution's victory. By his own account, that year subjected him to the harshest and most agonizing conditions he had ever experienced in detention. He was denied all visitors, and his family had no information about his whereabouts or physical condition. SAVAK regarded his activities as particularly threatening, given his remarkable ability to draw and inspire large crowds through his oratory. As a result, the regime imposed a travel ban on him that remained in force until the Islamic Revolution's triumph. Following the passing of Ayatollah Boroujerdi, the question of religious leadership, or marjaya, within the global Shia community came to the fore. Khamenei made considerable efforts to consolidate Ayatollah Khomeini's position as the most learned and authoritative source of religious guidance. Despite appearing on SAVAK's list of banned preachers, those prohibited from delivering public sermons, he continued to speak in various venues, carrying forward his popular and revolutionary activities with such reach and effectiveness that SAVAK ultimately shut down even the private teaching sessions he held at his own home. After his release from prison in 1975, he continued to be monitored by security agents. By 1977, the revolution had entered its final and decisive phase. The Pahlavi regime began sentencing prominent activists to internal exile, and Khamenei was among those condemned, assigned 3 years of exile in Iran-Shah. Savak agents raided his home, arrested him, and transferred him there, with the explicit aim of severing his connection to the people. Yet even in exile, he managed to establish contact with various communities and steadily grew in popularity. His rising influence in Iran-Shah prompted Savak to relocate him to Jiroft. But in 1978, a speech he delivered there sparked public demonstrations against the Pahlavi regime. Unable to suppress the revolutionary momentum, the regime ultimately abandoned its efforts to contain him. That same year, Khamenei returned to Mashhad. Perhaps Khamenei's most significant act in the period leading up to the revolution's triumph occurred during the days of Ashura. He delivered a fervent and impassioned sermon in Mashhad, reading it in the name of Sayyid at the shrine of the Imam. Among Muslims, it had long been customary to read such sermons in the name of the reigning monarch. This bold act shattered that convention. Up until that point, clerics had traditionally offered formal prayers on behalf of Shah Muhammad Pahlavi during ceremonial gatherings. Khamenei's defiance of this tradition was a powerful symbolic statement. In late 1978, the Pahlavi government's collapse accelerated rapidly. Imam Khomeini issued the order to establish the Council of the Islamic Revolution, and Khamenei was appointed to this council directly by the Imam. Finally, the revolution achieved its victory, and its leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, returned to his homeland on February 1, 1979, receiving a reception of unprecedented magnitude. To summarize Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's activities in the period before the revolution's victory, he pursued education, teaching, writing, and translation, cooperated closely with Imam Khomeini's movement, objected to the Imam's exile to Turkey, continued his revolutionary activities, and was arrested, imprisoned, and subjected to torture by Savak on at least 6 occasions. Following the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, several members of the Council of the Islamic Revolution assumed key ministerial positions. Among them, Khamenei took on responsibilities within the Ministry of Defense. He was also entrusted with the supervision of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a position he assumed just a few months after the revolution's victory. However, he stepped down from that role shortly afterward in order to contest elections for the Islamic Consultative Assembly, or Parliament. In 1980, he successfully secured a parliamentary seat through the electoral process. Shortly after the revolution's victory, Khamenei joined hands with a number of close associates, including fellow clerics and Ayatollah Ali Asghar Sanjani, to establish the Islamic Republic Party. He went on to serve as its third Secretary-General, following Ayatollah Beheshti and Dr. Bayhoner. He retained that position even through his presidential tenure. The party was ultimately dissolved in 1987 with Imam Khomeini's consent, largely because its principal figures had become too consumed with high-ranking governmental responsibilities to sustain it effectively. What is perhaps most remarkable about Khamenei's trajectory is this. At the dawn of the revolution's victory, he was by no means comparable in stature to the first-tier leaders of the revolution. In the presence of towering figures such as Ayatollah Beheshti, Ayatollah Motahari, Ayatollah Montazeri, and others, no one could have foreseen that someone like Khamenei would one day ascend to supreme leadership. He stands as a striking example of gradual and steady advancement. Following the revolution, he was appointed Friday prayer leader of Tehran at the personal recommendation of Imam Khomeini. Then, on September 22, 1980, the Iraqi army under Saddam Hussein launched a combined air and ground assault on Iran. From the very first hours of the Iran-Iraq War, Khamenei played an active and hands-on role in military affairs, personally appearing on the front lines in military uniform and serving as Imam Khomeini's advisor on matters of warfare. The first president of post-revolutionary Iran was Abul Hassan Banisadr. However, due to his secular orientation and his opposition to religious forces, he was removed from the presidency by the leader of the Islamic Revolution. Following Banisadr's dismissal, the second round of presidential elections produced Mohammad Ali Rajai as the newly elected president, but he served for only 28 days before being assassinated in a bombing at the Prime Minister's office. After Rajai's death, elections were held once more. This time, Khamenei put himself forward as a candidate and was elected president by an overwhelming majority, securing 95.11% of the vote. During his first 4-year term, tensions and disagreements with the Prime Minister and certain cabinet members left him unenthusiastic about seeking re-election. Nevertheless, following counsel from Imam Khomeini, he chose to run again and was re-elected with 85% of the vote. Both of his presidential terms coincided with the brutal and exhausting Iran-Iraq War, making them among the most demanding and turbulent periods of his life. He successfully served out both terms as the elected president of the Iranian people. In June 1989, as the nation and its officials were absorbed in preparations for the funeral and burial of Ayatollah Khamenei, the Assembly of Experts convened an urgent session to designate the next supreme leader of the Islamic Republic. Several members proposed Khamenei for the position, asserting that he possessed the competence and qualities required to lead the country. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani played the most pivotal role in securing Khamenei's appointment. Rafsanjani, considered among those closest to Imam Khomeini, conveyed the Imam's own words, that Khamenei possessed the merit for leadership. At that assembly, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, then 50 years old, was elected supreme leader by a majority of votes. The first decade of his leadership was largely devoted to consolidating and entrenching the foundations of his authority. During those years, he strengthened the Revolutionary Guard Corps, dealt firmly with critical publications, and oversaw a period that witnessed several mysterious killings of political opponents, deaths that some attributed to decisions made under his command. From the moment he assumed power, he suppressed numerous public uprisings with unflinching severity. On the geopolitical front, Iran grew significantly more influential across the Middle East under his leadership. The country provided decisive support to the Syrian government during its civil war, reinforced Hezbollah's presence and capabilities in Lebanon, and extended military assistance to the Houthi movement in Yemen. For 36 years, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had steered Iran with an iron hand, shaping the nation's domestic landscape and projecting its influence far across the region. Then, on February 28, 2026, the Islamic Republic announced that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei had passed away, bringing to a close one of the longest and most consequential leaderships in the modern Middle East. His death marked a seismic moment, not just for Iran, but for the entire region. It closed a chapter that had spanned revolution, devastating war, decades of international sanctions, and sweeping geopolitical ambition. The news immediately set in motion an urgent and deeply consequential process within the Assembly of Experts to determine who would succeed him as the next supreme leader of the Islamic Republic.